Hi everyone, I'm Carmelo Vanucci, and I'm going to talk today about the teaching and screening project that we did in Camden, Arkansas. We developed a nursing goal for the teaching plan. It was to educate senior citizens, 65 plus age, about the body mass index, effects of obesity on health, strategies and interventions for senior citizens to address obesity. We developed unique evaluation methods to provide a framework for future teaching and screening projects, and we wanted it to be applicable across diverse topics of education. We had the nursing goal for the screening was to perform the body mass index for the 65 plus, and we also incorporated an optional multiphasic screening. That is to say, if a participant was out of range of their BMI, overweight basically, we would provide ask them if they wanted us to take their blood pressure, and we would be better able to develop a risk profile for that individual. Or if they just wanted us to take it anyways, we did. And included in that, we also did just ask them what some basic chronic issues that they had going on and stuff like that, and that allowed us to better guide our risk profile. So this is just a pictorial representation of our before teaching plan process. So basically, before we made the teaching plan, we asked the question of who needs help in Camden, who has a higher risk for disease or higher rates of obesity, issues like that. And ours was basically obesity and the elderly, because they're prevalent. They have a higher prevalence in Camden. We looked for any existing protocols or frameworks to help guide the development of it. We analyzed the data that was available. We utilized the local and regional level databases, but we also tried to incorporate national and global levels of data. But that was much harder to do because it's out there, but it may not be available in digital form. So it would be paper, or proprietary, and they didn't want us to use the data. And then we tried to gain knowledge about our subject. So elderly, obesity, diet, exercise, BMI, and teaching strategies. So after we had done all that, the design phase of the teaching project comes into play. So we design the teaching project, execute the teaching project, interpret our observations or what we found that was effective in our teaching, what was ineffective, and what we could have changed. And then we analyze it for future reference. So we found that Q&A session was more effective than just the lecture format, because elderly people could voice their concerns, and we would be able to give them information that was in relation to them. These are just some short-term objectives that we had developed. This is just a short rundown of our teaching activities. So group lecture, this will be the Q&A. We had a poster board, we gave them handouts, and then we showed them how a BMI was taken. The outline of the plan, this would be how we identified learning needs. So we gave them a pre-lecture questionnaire. We used a Likert type 6-item, and we gave them a post-lecture questionnaire. We'll go over that later. We helped identify the level of education and health literacy. We used the local data, but also we used national data too, and cognitive function factors. So if we found that even if there would be a higher literacy in Camden. I don't think it is, but I think the literacy was lower than average. But for example, we'll say literacy rates in Camden were higher. Well, we're dealing with elderly and cognitive function decreases, so we need to still cater our teaching to a lower cognitive level. And then the rest of this is just a brief overview of the outline. This again is just basics of what we did during the teaching project. Some of this is redundant, and I'm sorry about that, but we did a lot of work in this project, and I guess we've made too many PowerPoints for it. This is going over the actual screening phase. So we perform a BMI on the participants, and then we provided the multi-phasic screening if they wanted it, and individualize a risk profile for them. This is again going over the individualized risk profile, the optional screening. I think the main thing on this PowerPoint that I wanted to highlight was the rationales that we would give for the risk profiles. Like, you possibly have diabetes because you're obese, but also it increases your risk for developing cardiovascular disease. And we would give them strategies to reduce their risk, not only of losing weight, but also diet and exercise and how that helps reduce the risk for certain chronic diseases. And the main thing is the identification of community resources for these folks. So if somebody had arthritis and they had trouble working out, we would tell them about any community assets such as a pool in order for them to be able to exercise and meet their exercise requirements. And that's the main thing that we highlighted. These are some rationales. We use an old adult learning theory, which is part of it is catered towards the older adult population. And it just runs down how we went about creating our project. So I'm not going to go, and you can read them on here. I'll have to run all of them down. And we also use Erickson's stages of development. I'm going through these slides and not really talking about them, because I'm going to talk about them in a little bit, because it all has to come together with the evaluation phase. This is an example of how we formatted our teaching, and it was developed this way because it's simpler for older individuals to read. We didn't use any we used block lettering. We didn't do any all uppercase letters. We didn't use any italicized script. And what helped guide us in developing it is because we knew who our participants for our teaching project were going to be, even though we had initially developed it for a 10th grade reading level, we changed it to a college reading level. It says 12th here, but it really was a college reading level, and that's 31. I'm going to talk about this in a minute, and this in a minute. But we used these frameworks for development. And you can see the bullet points, how they're offset. That was another important point that they wanted to, that they identified for the elderly community and learning needs. This is an example of, I believe it's the poster board. Okay, methods of evaluation. This was done pre-project. That is to say, about midway in the project, when we had identified our community that we were going to teach about. We did a pre-test or a pre-questionnaire about our skills or our perceived skill set, and we'll go over that in a minute. And we did a post-questionnaire. We also did a pre-lecture questionnaire for the participants and a post-lecture questionnaire. And we also added in a comparative self-assessment for ourselves, and we're going to go over that in a minute too. We did a question and answer session, which was very beneficial. We used the flesh reading E-scores, small reading levels, and I've already talked about those. This is how the small reading levels is broken down. Flesh reading E-scores. So I said college earlier, and I think it was 31 was the score, so it's right in that college range. This is the questionnaire we gave to the participants pre and post lecture, and it was a 6-item Likert scale, and basically we just wanted to know their perceived knowledge, what they thought that they already knew about the subject, which will allow us to evaluate them or evaluate our teaching. And we just wanted a better way to evaluate in a more quantitative manner, and that's what this attempt is basically. And I think it's going to be hard to read on the actual YouTube video because these are italicized and small. But the main thing that we made sure is that the scale that we used, we wanted the fully agree to be on the left side and the fully disagree to be on the right side, because oftentimes people don't read the rating scale and they will circle thinking that we're asking about agree on this side and disagree on this side, and that way we can throw out any outliers and make a better judgment on these assessments. And we also understand that this assessment, of course, is going to be biased in our case, but we just wanted to develop a method to use to help us measure and possibly use in the future for other teaching purposes. So if somebody works in administration, they could use this and format it in a different way for their nurses, possibly for job satisfaction, stuff like that. But we just wanted to create something that could be used in a lot of different areas. These are just the formulas that we use to analyze our data for the self-assessments. And I'm sure it's going to be hard to read. And these formulas actually came from this individual, Roebuck, and they used it for student evaluations in medical school. This is this is actually what we found after we analyzed our scores. So in question 1, there was a 55% perceived increase in their knowledge set. 60% question 4, 69% question 6. And of course, these are most likely not accurate because these individuals know that we did this for a grade, so they probably wanted to make sure that they didn't give us scores that were that were lower. Basically, they made sure that they put higher scores on the second assessment thing. But again, we can always use that for other purposes. This is our question set that we use for ourselves, and we did this pre-teaching project and post-teaching project to help us understand our own perceived skill set. And it was also a 1 through 6 Likert scale, and we did use three domains, one skill because we didn't have a lot of actual skills teaching, because we just showed them about the BMI and that was about it, how it's measured. And then the cognitive, which would be just knowledge-based information. And then the affective is basically awareness type stuff. And it's going to be hard to read, I think. I should have made this block lettering, but it's hard for me to read right now. But the wording is different, definitely different questions. We didn't use any of the same questions because we don't want to ask our elderly population. We don't know if they're have a health background or not. So we definitely kept them very general. I understand how obesity can impact my health. I understand what a BMI measurement is. I know what healthy foods are. I know what healthy exercise is. I know how much I need to exercise weekly to maintain my weight. I understand other factors that contribute to obesity. Those are the questions that we asked them. Questions that we asked ourselves are, in the skills domain, I can perform a BMI measurement on individuals in the 65 plus population. I can define the BMI scores for borderline obese, and morbidly obese in the 65 plus population. I understand how obesity impacts health. Question 4, I understand what a healthy diet should consist of for the 65 plus population. Question 5, I understand healthy exercises and a healthy exercise regime for the 65 plus population. Question 6, I understand other factors that contribute to obesity in the 65 plus population. Question 7, I am aware of teaching strategies used for the 65 plus population. Question 8 was, I understand and am prepared to resolve any ethical conflicts that may arise when teaching. This got cut off, and I'll have to go back and show you it's a 9-question questionnaire, and it has to do, the last two are ethical conflicts, and I know what to do if ethical conflict does arise. And those were asked just basically to make sure that we do safe recommendation levels. And this is just another thing that we use to evaluate. That's a formula that we use to evaluate that questionnaire for ourselves. And these are our this is the actual what came out, what we found about ourselves. And you can see that our scores didn't change at all in a lot of the questions. And I think these couple two were mainly about how BMI is taken and the normal ranges. So I know Chandra and Michael knew what those were, but I actually didn't know. Even though I was doing the teaching, I didn't know what a normal BMI should be for somebody, and I didn't even know how to take a BMI. I just knew how to take weight and stuff. But these of course are going to be skewed and biased and not realistic. But you can see how you can evaluate something in your workplace if you wanted to, and it's just an easy way to demonstrate that. This questionnaire was developed mainly to help guide our teaching plan and what we knew pre-teaching versus what we know post-teaching. But it was mainly to guide the teaching in order to develop it collaboratively. So we analyzed this to understand what each of our group partners knew. That's not a very good explanation. So basically, these were descriptive. These are blank, and we each individually filled them out. Answered them. We answered the questions, and then we got together, and then we went on the NIH website and compared our answers with their recommendations, and then we scored them based on a collaborative review. So if I had answered this and I thought my answer compared to the NIH recommendations was and it's a scale of 1 through 3. 1 would be agree, 2 would be somewhat not agree but accurate. 1 is accurate, 2 is somewhat accurate, and 3 is not accurate. And so if I thought my answer compared to the NIH recommendations was a 3, a not accurate, Chandra thought it was somewhat accurate, and Michael thought it was accurate, then it would actually still be not accurate because it's a negative leaning scale. And that's basically so. In that way, it's built-in bias to make sure that it's mainly for safety reasons. But I didn't really do an analysis on this because our scores really weren't significant, so I didn't want to go through the whole data part of it, crunching the numbers, because they really wouldn't have been that significant, because most of us were pretty spot on. I think I was wrong. I didn't know about this one, and number 2, 1 and 2, but the rest of the scores were mostly accurate. There was really no change. But in that way, we can develop plans of implementation based on knowledge. This is some of the Q&A questions that we asked post-lecture, and this was probably the most beneficial. And these are some of the questions that we asked. Of course, there was a lot more open-ended questions that would go along with these questions and their questions that they asked us. And in this way, this helped us with the screening, the multiphasic screening, and the development of a risk profile for these individuals. But I think that we came to the conclusion that the Q&A is almost more beneficial than anything, because really you can cater it to their needs. This is just a pictorial, this is just a Venn diagram of how we went about the analysis phase after the post-lecture, post-teaching project. So we observed the teaching project, we reviewed the data, and then we made interpretations, and we found that the Q&A was most beneficial. The handouts and the poster board were appropriate for our age group and our learning purposes, and that really the questionnaires were not going to be accurate. They're going to be skewed. So, but anyways, we move on to this is how we developed going about searching how to find what to teach, basically. And it looks intimidating, but it really isn't. This K-means algorithm in product group, we were just trying to group our search out for information in categories that would be easily broken down. So if we did a search on diet, we grouped diet, and then we would do a subgroup of healthy diets, and then there might be another subgroup of healthy foods in those healthy diets. And that's what that basically is talking about. This part right here, the term vectoring, that is basically a way for us to use a lot of documents, and instead of using title words or subject searches and other methods like that, basically we define what we're trying to find out, and these would be like the in-text words that we're trying to find. And then the main thing is that it has to have like a verb part in the text. And then after that part of it, this is just a representation of how, if we had so many documents, how these documents and these words line up in the frequency. So in document 1, this word diet only shows up once in document 1, once in document 2, and no times in the text in document 3. Obesity, exercise, you can see, so basically exercise showed up 0 times in document 1, 0 times in document 2, 1 time in document 3. So, and you can correlate exercise, elderly. So this document 3 probably has to do with healthy exercises for the elderly. This document probably only has to do with obesity and diet, because it only shows up, those things only show up. And then this document 2 would have to do with diet and the elderly. So that helps refine our search, because that way we don't waste the time on something that we don't really need. And that's just a representation of the math part of it. But no one knows that. And this is just the syntax of how it's gone about. And it basically is the same as the chart that I showed in the other slide, but the main thing is that this part, this product, is basically asking what we wanted to find. And then, so if we wanted to define diet, exercise, obesity, and the elderly, right here, there, and compare those two documents. And it found that it's not, these two documents really don't fit for our search needs. So this is continuing. Oh, conclusions to our document search. This is the library and the machine that we use. We use the Hadoop map reduction, and basically, out of the 96,000 documents that normally would occur on a normal search, and that's actually, I think it was more than 96,000 documents relating to our subject matter, we could reduce it down to 50 by using the Brown vector, and that's the main thing that it does. And finally, our conclusions to our teaching project, that's the evaluation. There was an increase in the mean self-assessment scores, both for us and for the participants. We did find that the descriptive knowledge test for us pre-teaching strategy was helpful in guiding our teaching plan appropriately, and helped us define the most accurate information primary for our needs for the elderly. The Q&A is very beneficial as a teaching strategy, even more so than just a lecture format. The 65 plus population needs scenario relation material to help them learn, so we can't just give them straight didaction. We have to actually talk to them and find out what their concerns are, what kind of chronic diseases they may have, and then we can better direct the teaching that way. And that kind of comes into the Q&A, and we do that a lot clinically. But I guess it's important to remember, if going out in the community, that you should also include a Q&A to help guide the scenario. And just giving examples during a lecture really still isn't as effective as a Q&A is. And I know it's difficult to do a Q&A for a long time because you get a lot of questions, but I guess that would depend on your group size too. We had a small group size, so it didn't take too long. We found that the self-rating questionnaires have a built-in bias with them, so you have to make sure that when you're evaluating, you have to develop the right questionnaire and the right questions within that questionnaire for what you're trying to evaluate. And you have to be aware of common causes that would skew your results. So it's really not that appropriate. You have to make sure of your audience and of your results. And the collaborative review process that we used with the pre-test, post-test was very beneficial, especially because we were able to ask questions about the subject that we may not have been as accurate as we thought we were before the project versus after the project. So, and then these are just some of the references.